Today, millions of people admire the Mona Lisa. It is perhaps the most famous painting in the world. Its mysterious smile has fascinated many for centuries. The person who painted it, Leonardo da Vinci, is celebrated as a true genius, a Renaissance man. He was brilliant in many fields, including art, engineering, and science. His notebooks show ideas for amazing inventions like flying machines similar to helicopters, military tanks, and water pumps. He carefully studied human bodies to understand muscles and bones. He also looked deeply at how water moved. We see him as a visionary, a person far ahead of his time, standing on the highest level of human achievement. However, there is a surprising contradiction. In his own time, many educated people thought Leonardo da Vinci was not smart at all. They called him an homo senza lettere, which means a man without letters. This meant they saw him as uneducated and lacking culture. The scholars in important cities like Florence and Milan often looked down on him. They respected his ability to paint beautiful pictures, but they did not see him as a serious intellectual. To them, he was a craftsman, not a philosopher or a scientist. Why did they think this? The main reason was his lack of formal schooling. Leonardo never went to a university. He did not learn Latin well, which was the language of all important studies and serious thought. He knew little about the classic books from ancient Greece and Rome, which were the foundation of all accepted knowledge back then. Scholars of his day believed that true knowledge came from these old texts. If you didn't master them, you weren't considered intelligent. In their strong opinion, Leonardo was simply ignorant or stupid. This big difference is striking. The man we now call a genius was once called stupid. How can this be? What does this huge gap between how we see him today and how his own world saw him truly tell us? This question is more than just about history. It cuts to the heart of what we believe intelligence to be. It makes us think about who gets to define genius in any society, and what important insights or brilliant minds we might miss when we only look for smart people in a certain narrow way. This story of Leonardo's life will help us explore this fascinating puzzle and understand what real intelligence means both then and now. 2. The world of books. Renaissance Italy had a special way of thinking. People there, especially in cities like Florence, greatly loved ancient ideas and books. This period saw a big movement called humanism. Humanists believed that the best ideas came from ancient Greece and Rome. They saw finding and studying these old books as very important work. Writers like Plato, Aristotle, and Cicero were seen as the wisest people. Humanists worked hard to find these old texts which had been lost for many years. They translated them and studied them carefully. They believed that reading these classical works would make people wise and able to speak well. These two skills were key for anyone considered educated. This way of thinking was central to their world. Humanists created special schools. In these schools, students learned grammar, speaking skills, poetry, moral philosophy, and history. All these subjects came from studying Latin and Greek books. To be truly educated meant you could read, write, and speak Latin fluently and beautifully. You had to know famous quotes from old Roman writers and use them in your conversations and debates. Latin was not just for literature. It was the language of power. All important areas of study, like religion, law, medicine, and science, used Latin. Professors gave their lessons in Latin. Important scholarly books were written in Latin. Even letters between important people were in Latin. If you did not know Latin, you could not be part of this world of educated thinkers. You were outside. Humanists believed that classical learning helped people become good citizens. They wanted to create universal men, people who knew a lot about many classical subjects. These men could use their wisdom and good speaking skills to help their cities. However, this whole idea was built on knowing classical books very well. Renaissance scholars looked to the past for knowledge. They did not try to discover new things. Instead, they focused on reading and understanding old texts. For them, truth came from the words of the ancient writers. To be called intelligent, a person had to be a master of these old books and languages. This was the world Leonardo da Vinci lived in. 3. Leonardo's School. Leonardo da Vinci was born in a small town in Italy. His father was a man who worked with laws and documents, but his mother was a simple village woman. They were not married, which meant Leonardo was born outside of marriage. In those times, this was very important for a person's future. Because of his birth, Leonardo could not go to a university. Universities were places where young men learned Latin and ancient Greek. These languages were needed to read old books by famous thinkers from Greece and Rome. People who went to university often became lawyers, doctors, or scholars. Leonardo could not follow his father's job because it needed a university education and strong Latin skills. Instead, when Leonardo was about 14 years old, his father sent him to work for an artist. This artist was Andrea del Verrocchio, who had a busy workshop in Florence. This workshop became Leonardo's school. It was a place where he learned by doing, not just by reading books. In the workshop, Leonardo learned many practical skills. He learned how to paint, how to sculpt, and how to work with different materials. He studied how light and shadow worked, and how the human body looked and moved. He learned about tools and how to build things. His lessons came from watching, trying, and making. Leonardo did not learn much Latin or classical literature. While other smart people spent their days reading ancient texts, Leonardo spent his days observing the world around him. He learned geometry by measuring real objects, not just from books. He studied the flight of birds by watching them fly, not by reading old theories. This practical way of learning made him an outsider among the educated people of his time. Scholars believed true knowledge came from old books and ancient authorities. They thought learning from experience alone was not enough. To them, Leonardo was not properly educated. He lacked the formal training that was highly valued, especially in Latin and the writings of ancient scholars. This difference in education set Leonardo apart from the leading thinkers of his era. 4. The stupid man. Many people today see Leonardo da Vinci as a great genius. But in his own time, things were very different. The educated people, especially scholars who loved old books, looked down on him. They often called him Homo senza lettere. This means a man without letters or a man without books. It was a way to say he was uneducated and not smart enough. These scholars thought that real knowledge came only from ancient Greek and Roman books. They believed that to be truly intelligent, you had to read and understand these old texts, mostly written in Latin. Since Leonardo had not gone to a university and did not know Latin well, they thought his ideas were not important. They saw him as just a skilled worker, good at making things, but not a thinker. When Leonardo wrote about his own ideas, he wrote in Italian. He also did not often quote famous old writers like Aristotle or Galen. Instead, he wrote about what he saw and what he learned by doing. For example, if he studied a river, he described the water's movement from his own observations. He said his knowledge came from esperienza, which means experience. To the scholars, this was a big mistake. They believed that knowledge from experience alone, without the wisdom of ancient authorities, was useless. They felt that Leonardo's studies were not proper science or philosophy. They thought he should stick to painting and sculpture, where he was good, and leave deep thinking to those who knew their books. They found his attempts to explain things through his own eyes embarrassing. Leonardo knew about this criticism, and it made him angry. In his personal notebooks, he often wrote against these presumptuous people. He knew they thought they could judge him because he lacked formal schooling. He felt dismissed and called them stupid fools for valuing others' works over his own new discoveries. He was frustrated that the academic leaders of his time did not respect his way of learning. 5. His own teacher. Leonardo da Vinci felt the sharp words from scholars. They called him a man without letters and said he was uneducated. But Leonardo did not stay quiet. He fought back with strong words of his own. In his notebooks, he wrote against those who thought they were better than him. He called them presumptuous people who had no right to criticize. He used a famous old saying to make his point clear. He asked, "Do those who pride themselves on the works of other men claim to challenge mine?" This meant that scholars only used old books, but he, Leonardo, created new things and learned by himself. He was proud to learn in his own way. He even signed some of his letters, Leonardo da Vinci, disciple of experience. This phrase was very important. It meant that experience, not books, was his teacher. Leonardo believed that seeing things directly and trying them out was the best way to gain knowledge.
He wrote, "My subjects are to be dealt with by experience rather than by words." For him, experience was like a great teacher, a mistress he would always follow. He also said that all sciences are vain and full of errors that are not born of experience, the mother of all knowledge. This was a bold statement. It meant that if you don't learn from the real world, your knowledge is likely wrong.
Leonardo argued that those who only studied old books were not truly wise. They just repeated what others had said before. He called these book-smart people intellectual parasites. He said they were puffed up and pompous, using the ideas of others instead of finding new truths for themselves. They did not do their own hard work of discovering. For Leonardo, the humanists were wrong to rely only on old writings. They would check what Aristotle or Galen had said and believe it was true. If what they saw with their own eyes was different, they would think their eyes were wrong, not the old books. Leonardo did the opposite. He started with what he saw. He trusted his own observations. He believed that experience never errs. He said that only people's ideas about experience could be wrong. He always wanted to commence with experience and from this to proceed to investigate the reason. This meant he would first look, then think about why things happened. He was his own teacher, learning directly from the world around him, not just from what was written in ancient texts. 6. Learning from nature. Leonardo learned new things by looking very closely at the world. He did not just read old books. He saw, touched, and studied nature directly. This was his main way of learning, and he called it experience. For example, in anatomy, people for a long time believed the ancient doctor Galen. But Galen had mostly studied animals, not human bodies. Leonardo wanted to know the truth. He carefully cut open human bodies. This was very difficult and unpleasant work, often done in secret. But he made many drawings that showed the human body much better than ever before. He drew bones, muscles, and organs with great detail and correctness. He even made models of the heart and brain to understand them. He corrected many mistakes from old books, because he trusted his own eyes and what he found from experience. He also studied the earth itself. He saw fossil shells on the tops of mountains. Many people believed these shells came from a big flood, like in the Bible. But Leonardo looked closely. He saw that the shells were in layers, just like how they form slowly in the sea. He knew that some shells were from animals that could not move far. So he understood that these mountains were once under the sea, a very long time ago. This was a new and big idea. It showed that Earth's history was much, much older than people thought. Leonardo was also very interested in how birds fly. He spent many years watching them. He sketched their wings and how they moved in the air. He tried to understand the air itself and how birds used it. He wrote a book called Codex on the Flight of Birds. In this book, he described how birds use air pressure to lift themselves. He also learned about inertia, which is how things keep moving. He saw how birds use warm air currents to glide. His studies helped him design his own flying machines, even though they were never built in his time. In all these areas, Leonardo learned by observing and experimenting. He did not start with old ideas. He started with the world around him and learned from it directly. He proved that nature was the best teacher of all. 7. A new kind of smart. Leonardo's lack of a formal education, the very thing scholars criticized, was actually his greatest strength. Because he did not spend years reading ancient books, he was not trapped by their old, sometimes wrong ideas. He did not know what ancient writers like Aristotle said was impossible, so he tried to do it anyway. He also did not simply accept old ideas about the human body from Galen. He looked for himself. This made him a forerunner of the modern scientist. Leonardo learned by looking, testing, and trying things. He believed in observation and experiment more than in old texts. He was ready to question old beliefs. He carefully recorded what he saw. He used math to describe nature. He tested his ideas again and again. These are the same methods that modern scientists use today. Leonardo did these things more than 100 years before people like Galileo, who are often called the fathers of modern science. His way of thinking was different. The scholars of his time valued knowing many books and speaking Latin well. But Leonardo's genius was visual and practical. He was very smart in seeing things in 3 dimensions and drawing them perfectly. This is called spatial intelligence. His ability to control his hands and body, seen in his drawing and machine designs, showed great bodily intelligence. He was also good at seeing patterns in nature, a naturalistic intelligence. Leonardo thought with images and drawings more than with words and complex arguments. His education in an artist's workshop taught him by making things. He learned that to create something, like a painting or a machine, you needed to understand materials and forces deeply. This was practical knowledge, tested against the real world. This was a new kind of smart, one that the book-smart scholars of his day did not understand or value. His freedom from old ideas allowed him to see and understand the world in a revolutionary way. 8. The lesson from Leonardo. Leonardo da Vinci was called a man without letters. Many people in his time thought he was not smart. This was because he did not study old books or speak Latin well, which was important for educated people. But this idea of intelligence was too narrow and wrong. They only thought being smart meant knowing ancient texts and what old writers had said. Leonardo's real genius lay in his courage to trust his own eyes. He looked closely at the world around him. He spent years studying birds, human bodies, and rocks, not just reading about them. He did not simply repeat what others had written long ago. Instead, he learned directly from experience. He proudly called himself a disciple of experience. This different way of thinking helped him discover many new things. He found answers by observing, drawing, and doing, rather than only by reading books. His methods were different, but they led to great breakthroughs. This story holds an important lesson for us today.
How do we define intelligence in our own time? Do our modern education systems and workplaces value all kinds of smarts? Or do we still focus mainly on just a few types, like being good with words or numbers or passing standard tests? It is easy to label someone as not intelligent if they do not fit our usual expectations. Perhaps our modern societies are also overlooking geniuses right now. There might be people with brilliant ideas and skills who do not fit the common mold. They might not excel at traditional schoolwork or get high scores on every test. But like Leonardo, they might have unique ways of seeing the world, of making things, or of solving problems. We might be missing out on their revolutionary insights because our view of what makes someone truly intelligent is too narrow. Leonardo's story reminds us that true genius can come in many forms. His lack of traditional education freed him to think differently. He looked at the universe as a book written in nature's own language, not in Latin. We should learn from his example. What do you think? Are we still making the same mistakes today by having a too narrow idea of what counts as smart? How can we better recognize all forms of intelligence in our world?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.